Hello everyone and welcome to a video talking about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I have beat the game and it took me 92 hours. I never thought I'd play an Assassin's Creed game that took me that long to beat. So I thought I'd do a review video essentially, but it's just going to be me speaking to the camera. No gameplay because I didn't record any, I didn't plan on doing this, but I felt like I had to get my thoughts out about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, the first term that comes to mind with it is quantity over quality. I think the game had way too much in it. It was trying to do too much, and it could have easily sacrificed parts of the game that could result in them focusing on other areas of the game that needed more focus. Because there were some good moments in this game. There are some great parts of this game. But it could have been so much better if they put more care and attention into certain systems in the game, story moments. So this will be a spoiler video. If you don't want to be spoiled about Assassin's Creed Valhalla, don't come to this video. So, first of all, we'll start with gameplay. I actually enjoyed the gameplay a bit. I obviously do prefer the old Assassin's Creed games. Unity, I think, had the best combat system out of any Assassin's Creed. Still my personal favourite to this day. It just felt that had a lot of flavor in it, and it was like different ways to take down different enemies. Valhalla, you kind of just swing at everything until it dies, and you have all these abilities and whatnot. And for reference, I have played all the Assassin's Creeds. I didn't beat Syndicate. I got basically all the upgrades before I beat it, and then I never finished it. I can't quite remember why. I didn't finish Origins because I didn't find it that interesting. I thought the setting was amazing and I liked Bayek as a character, but the new way that Assassin's Creed went in, I didn't like initially. And the same with Odyssey. I didn't find the characters interesting enough, and I really tried to beat Odyssey a few times and I just couldn't get past 10 hours. I really couldn't, even maybe a bit more, 15 hours, whatever. I got decently far in one section, and I heard that game was very long as well. I'm not quite sure exactly, so I can't compare it to Valhalla, but Valhalla took me 92 hours to complete. So in terms of the gameplay, I thought it was okay. I did like it a lot, for the most part, but once you get towards the later hours of the game, it gets very samey. When you've upgraded everything, it is kind of like it's challenging, especially in the first half of the game. It's actually really challenging at points. The boss fights are really good and well thought out, because there's using your bow and arrow on the weak points if you wish. You could definitely play to how you want with what weapons you want. Dual wield shields, do whatever you want. I stuck with dual wielding axes pretty much for I'd say probably about 90% of the game. I used the two-handed sword for probably the rest of it. I did try out the various things early on in the game, but I just liked the two-handed axes. It was in the poster for the game, and I kind of just liked the look of it a lot more. And it was good. You had to be good at timing. It had to be decent, but on the second half onwards, it got way too easy. I never lost a fight after this in the second half of the game. The first half, I was fighting those druid children. The three sisters, I'm not sure if they were sisters, but that's how I'll think of them, because you'll know who the ones where you have to stick the swords in the back of the throne to get the special weapon. You get a dagger or whatever from each of them. But they're swords. They're definitely swords, not daggers. Daggers. And quite simply, it's one of those pissed me off to no end. I raged like it was a Dark Soul boss. It was ridiculous. And I was like, okay, this game has got some meat to it. It actually is a bit of a challenge. And obviously, what we want in every game is a decent bit of challenge to make it rewarding. But the second half of the game, you get so many abilities. And I think it might have been a bit different in my case, because I didn't kind of just go through the story and do stuff as I was going. I fell into this really bad habit, which may have made the game more stale for me by the end of it. But every time I went into a new area, I 100%ed that area that I went in. So I think I didn't do it with the last couple of regions, and I'll explain why later. I ended up getting all the mysteries, all the artifacts, and all the wealth in majority of the provinces that are in England in the game. And I think I ended up getting too powerful for the game. I'd go into a new area in the story and I'd be a power level about 100 over what it was. And by the end of the game, I was max power level going into the final section. It was ridiculous and I was overpowered. I just couldn't be beaten. The abilities were really strong, and I get that's the point. Your abilities are supposed to be strong, but when you get enough ability points, I'm gonna have a sip, 1 second. Once you get enough ability points, it gets a bit absurd. You end up one shot. I mean, it's because I went so far ahead. I kept 100% in these areas, so I got loads of levels out of each area, and I ended up being way more powerful for each area that I went in. So maybe it's just the way I played. Maybe I made it too easy for myself or something. But I would just, the enemies like are very sameish as well. You end up fighting a lot of the Saxons and you just learn them over time, and it's fun initially when you're learning how to take them down, but once you do, you end up just I ended up becoming so powerful. I'd either like one hit them, the bow and arrow would often one hit headshot, especially when you got some of the abilities later on, like the tackle them to the ground and punch them to death. That would take out some of the bigger enemies for me just easily. And I was playing on normal difficulty, I think, whatever that was, or maybe the harder one, actually. It said this is recommended for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that's what it said, so I picked that one, because I wanted to experience the story, which we'll get to, because it's a much bigger horse to much bigger problem to tackle. But I think... yeah, the combat got way too easy. The bosses were nothing at the end of the game. That I was just able to use the fruit to slow time ability with the bow, hit the weak point, and I was so high level. When I did a stun attack on them, they'd lose like a third of their health, if not a bit less than that most of the time. And then my weapons were really powerful. The enemies kind of became predictable because there's only so much you can do. I just found these really powerful abilities, and I didn't like a lot of the other abilities compared to the ones I had. I just picked the best ones, and I ended up just making the combat really easy. The chain, the whip one where you drag them to you and then you do a big hit where you could decapitate them, that was stupidly powerful. The throwing axes everywhere was great for crowd control. They were really fun abilities to use in combat, but by like the 60th hour, I was like, it's just walk into a battle, throw a bunch of axes, hit all the ones on the ground, slow time down, do some weak points on the bigger enemies that have a bit more health, stun attack them, insta-kill them. I don't know. It just got really sameish at the end and boring. Unfortunately, while it was still like bearable, it could have been a lot worse, but it just got easy. The systems themselves are good, but it got too easy because the game just gave me the ability to go way above the levels that I was going into. It wasn't scaling, although I don't agree with scaling in games like this, scaling levels. But I prefer to keep it like locked levels so you could come back later on and defeat the boss or whatever. But I found even early on, I was beating bosses. So often when you come across an enemy that is way higher level than you, they show up in red. Their name shows up in red and they get a skull next to them. There were bosses, some of the animal bosses in the game, that I was fighting, they were in the red, and I still beat them, and that's like midway through the game. Some of the abilities are definitely more exploitable than others, and make you significantly more powerful for it. There was some, midway through, there were definitely some animal boss fights that got me killed a couple of times, but from there on, when I started really getting through the power levels, and I had like all the skills in the game, it was ridiculous. I was just taking things out left, right, and center. It wasn't even a challenge anymore. Like, I just saw these big moments in the story where there's like, oh, I'm gonna fight you now. It's been a build up to fighting this person. And I'm just thinking, I'm not feeling threat. I'm not feeling anything from the story because I know I can just kick his ass with a ground pound and then the whip and then hit his weak points, stun, hit him a little bit in between that. And it just got way too easy. So unfortunately for me, the way I played the game, I guess ruined it for me. I should have gone through the story a bit quicker, I guess, rather than trying to do everything that there was in a province, then move on to the next province, do the story, then do everything in there and do that. So next thing we'll talk about is the customization. Let's talk about that, actually. I loved it. The customization was fantastic. I loved the look of all the armors, though not historically accurate. A lot of it was very historically inaccurate, but it's a game, artistic license. I'm not going to go into that any further, so I didn't think about it. We'll get off that topic. I think that all of the different sets of armor impressed me in one way or another. It was all done really well. Graphically, it was a very beautiful game. We'll get into graphics later, but the armor looked so crisp and detailed, and you can mix and match it. You could choose to hide a certain armor piece. So you click in, I was playing with the controller, so you click in the right stick and then it hides that piece of gear. So you still have the stats and it still benefits you, but it doesn't show it on the character. And I hid my bow the entire game because I just didn't like the look of the bow, so I was able to hide it. It was really nice. It was really cool. Same with the helmet. I didn't want a helmet on, and I did the same thing. The leveling up and crafting system was really good. And again, I think that's where it made the customization more enjoyable for me. The way I played the game, going through and 100%ing all the areas, I just had everything to be able to upgrade, and even still, even going through and 100%ing areas, I was still finding points where, okay, I got to go and get that item, I got to go and get this. It was still fun and enjoyable to go and look for things to upgrade my armor, and it kept changing the look of your armor. So you'd have sets of gear. So there's like the Thane set. That is like, there's a cape, gauntlets, boots, armor, and a helmet. That's like set, and then if you wear a full set of the same thing, you grant certain benefits, like the Raven, and each tier. So it went from like common to, I didn't read the actual names of the things, but it goes from like a grey, so it's coloured, tiers, like in Fortnite. I don't know, that's the first thing I thought of. So like the lowest level gear that you start with is like grey, then it goes into red, then blue, and then gold, and that's mythical level armor. And you tend to get that later on in the game, much later on, obviously. It naturally progresses, and it feels good, the progression of getting better armor over time, because as you get into the higher level areas, you get higher level materials. So it worked really well, that customization system and upgrade system. And there was a plethora of weapons to choose from. Maybe the combat wasn't as fun for me because I didn't mix up my weapons enough. I ran with the double axes because they worked for me. Maybe if I changed my weapons more often, I would have had more enjoyment out of the combat system. So I'd recommend that. If you're going to play Assassin's Creed Valhalla, every 10 hours or so, change your weapons, try something new, because that's not what I did. I didn't give a lot of them a chance. And if I did try something else out, I personally just didn't enjoy it. So not that those weapon systems are bad or mechanically they're made bad. It's just personal preference. I just wanted to be like a badass Viking with, dual wielding axes. So it was like, I wanted to fulfill that fantasy of it. So I didn't want to run around, like I ran around with a shield and an axe for a long time actually at the beginning. Then I switched to dual axes and I pretty much stuck with that. Tried a great sword towards the end. But there's spears, there's flails, there's daggers, you can dual wield shields in the game. There's a lot to choose from. Then there's all the different types of bows. I stuck with the hunter bow the entire game. I didn't feel the need to switch. Hunter bow was really powerful. It had the right everything for me. Light bow, basically you use it and you don't need to pull the string. It's really quick firing bow, but it doesn't do as much damage. To my knowledge, I didn't really use it that much. I used it like once throughout the entire 92 hours. Then you've got the Predator bow, which zooms in. It basically turns into a gun at that point. Not necessarily, but... And then you can literally follow the arrows that go, and it makes it extreme accuracy, essentially. But it felt very jittery with the controller, trying to aim with the Predator bow. Therefore, I didn't really use it a whole lot. Because it felt too clunky to direct the arrows correctly. And like the aim just felt like it jolted loads. Maybe that was a sensitivity thing. Maybe I should have slowed down the sensitivity. But I didn't choose to. Hunter bow worked fine for me. I didn't need to switch. Again, maybe that's just the crux of my situation. I just enjoyed the hunter bow and I didn't need to switch, so I didn't feel the need to. But again, I'd recommend you experiment. It'll probably make you enjoy the combat system for a bit longer. And most people probably don't play the game like I do, trying to 100% every area. Therefore... they probably won't come across the ridiculous power scaling levels that I had going into them. But you can mix and match all the gear sets as much as you wanted. The only issue I have with it, and it's a minuscule thing, it really isn't that big of an issue with the customization now, is that you couldn't, when you upgraded a piece of armor, it would take it, the appearance would change. So each set has like all the different levels and they change appearance the next tier that they go up to mythical status, and then it cannot be changed any further. The appearance stays the same from there on. You cannot keep the stats of the mythical. You cannot keep the mythical stats without making it look like a lower tier, because a lot of the mythical tier stuff goes like gold lined, gold plated, and it can go quite over the top and quite crazy at that point. And I didn't like that personally. I wanted to keep it a bit more grounded. It's not very historic, like I said, not very historically accurate, but I wanted to keep it somewhat like to a humble level. But it kind of gets out of hand and to fantasy degrees of embroiderment and gold-plated stuff. And you cannot make it look like a lower tier without and you can't bring it down a tier in looks. And you can't change, and obviously stat-wise, it's always going to change the same once you've upgraded it, but you cannot make it look like a previous tier. I kind of wish they added that in. Maybe they will, I don't know. But that's like a small thing. I'm fine to deal with the mythical status gear. It's great to have because it makes you a lot more powerful. And it's like, obviously, the stats are worth it. And I kind of just looked past it for me personally. So it's a small thing. A lot of people won't have an issue with it. It's just me because I wanted to look a bit more authentic, I guess, even though the armors don't look authentic regardless. And you can also change your haircut as well. I actually did change my, I had a bald Eivor, like a crew, really shaved head for most of the game because it looked a bit like Ragnar Lothbrok from the TV show. I never finished that TV show. Again, it's not a very historically accurate TV show, but I thought it was a badass TV show. It was still a really fun TV show to watch. Anyway, shaved, had the shaved head, and I changed the beard multiple times. You can customize your ship, the tattoos all over your body. It's really good. Customization system is like a 9 out of 10 for me. It's like pretty amazing. If I was to give the combat a rating, I'll give it out of 10 for each thing off the cuff. So it could be could be better, could be more accurate possibly if I thought about it properly. But these are just my initial thoughts after completing the game, and I completed it today. Today was when I finished it. So, and I'm trying to think. God, lost train of thought. Yeah, so out for the combat, I'd give it probably a 7 out of 10 because it was a really fun combat system, but I didn't vary. I think I could have alleviated it a bit if I tried to change up what weapons I used and whatnot, and if I didn't play the way I did. So I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe other people had different experiences. It was brutal, gory, great, whatever. I love that part of it. If it's going to be a Viking game, make it brutal and gory. So let's go on to graphics. So gorgeous game, one of the best Assassin's Creed games I've seen. God, the color in it is amazing. Not quite Ghost of Tsushima level color, but some immense cool like autumn colors, and it mix. And then there's there's a snow environment in the north of the game, at the beginning of the game as well, and just the magnificence of it is pretty breathtaking. The lighting is really well done in the game. I thought really I don't know, graphically I thought it was really good. It definitely looked like, so in terms of the character textures, it looked odd, and it just looked, I don't know, some characters just looked off, like mushy. The textures weren't fully done, and often you'd get characters that are bigger in size, and then their arms would like clip through their body and stuff like that in conversations, which was really off-putting at some points. There was a lot of clipping issues, I'll say that, with like weapons and clothing and stuff like, especially if you mix and match your gear, there could be a lot of clipping involved, and like you see the armor's clipping through another piece of armor that's not expected to be there for that set of armor, and it happens a lot with some of the characters as well. It's really, it does happen a really good amount of clipping, to be honest, and that goes for like people clipping into buildings, animations where they're sat there idle and like they're crying and their face just goes straight into their face. It's kind of like, it could be pretty horrific sometimes, it could look pretty terrifying at points. But yeah, there's a lot of that happens, and the flame effect wasn't the best, but it's a big game, so I guess they, don't know, maybe for optimization purposes, they didn't make the fire like 10 out of 10. But like Eivor looked great texture-wise on his face. He looked really good. The lip syncing could definitely have some work. It looked really off at times, especially when comparing it to games like The Witcher 3. really, I mean, there were points where I think it was a bug. Obviously, it's not meant to happen. But there were points where characters' lips would be sealed during a conversation. They wouldn't even speak. There wouldn't be lip sync happening. And it happened fairly rarely, but when it did happen, obviously you noticed it pretty badly. It happens, and they like it. And then you have to restart the game to get them to get their mouths to move again. It happened a lot. And overall, the animation was like... It was good for some things. Some things were like great animation, and some things were really bad animation. Like the idol stuff, there were just some characters, and they were just kind of. I'm not an animator. I don't work on video games. I can't judge it based off my own experience. But some of them looked really rushed. Like they didn't look like they'd been fine-tuned. And I get it. It's a big game, but this is the point: quality over quantity. And we'll get to, that'll be my final point, and how they can alleviate a lot of the issues that I have with the game. They'd fix a lot of my issues with the game after what I say at the end of this. And, really, God, it's like, it's especially, you notice it especially, one with the lip syncing, it can be really bad at times, or non-existent, like I said. Even in cutscenes in the game, because, like, not when you're speaking to somebody and the game kind of makes you make your decisions and whatnot. In pre-rendered cutscenes that happen, even then, the animations can be a lot better in those. But there were definitely moments, even in them, that it was a bit like, ooh, that, I mean, you could tell it was rough, the animation in a lot of this. Some of the animations for your fighting abilities, though, were fantastic. Like the tackle and the ground pound, that was badass to see, especially like in the open. It looked like really brutal, really cool. The axe throwing was a great animation. The whip one, the hook, I don't know, I guess I'll call it the whip. It's not a whip, but I forget. But yeah, that I thought the animation on some things was really great. And because of the nature of the combat in the game, where like it's like an RPG where it's like numbers coming off them, and it's not like, oh, it's like a big animated hit sort of thing. You kind of just swing, and when it hits them, they react. But it's like kind of like it feels like they go through them at some points. There's not much impact in some of the combat, if that makes sense. I guess we're going back to the combat category a bit here, but sometimes it can feel really like the animation gives it a lot of heft, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it kind of just feels like you're going through marshmallows on a battlefield. It can vary for sure, but the ground pound one and some of the abilities definitely had an oomph behind them when you used them, and it felt like, oh my god, I just hit that guy really hard, and that was great. That happened a lot, I noticed, but there were definitely some moments though, especially when you use light attacks and sometimes heavy attacks. It just felt like you kind of just went through them. You do damage, but it just went through them. It feels like it doesn't even feel like you hit them really. So especially in a game like this, you need to have that point of the game crisp and like impactful, and just really feel every hit you're dealing out, as a strong Viking sort of character. So let's go on to the sound anyway, the audio in the game. Where to begin? So the voice acting, I will count this in audio. I don't know why, but we'll count voice acting. I enjoyed a lot of the voice acting in the game, especially from Eivor. I thought it was good. But everyone else was like, Sigurd was okay. For the most part, they did their jobs, but everyone else kind of. I'm trying to think of like a character that really stood out to me aside from that. I can't really think of one. Soma was a good character. I liked Soma a lot. Ranvi, I thought she was a cool character. But the voice acting in terms of delivery, Eivor was good. But I think it was the way it was implemented in the game. Like a lot of the side characters, it was just not good voice. Like it was okay voice acting. It's very acceptable for, a game. But it wasn't like outstanding. It won't be like Witcher 3 quality where it really kind of sells you on the whole thing. You really feel for somebody in that moment. You really want to hurt somebody in that moment. I did have a couple of moments in that in the story, actually. Not really want to hurt someone in real life in the game, obviously. I felt angry about some things that happened in the story, and it's meant to make you feel that way. But yeah, I just thought that it was very hit and miss sometimes. I think with the main story, it was overall quality was okay to good. It was like okay to good. But the side missions definitely like it was like they were like throwaway side missions. I really didn't ultimately, especially when you're 100%ing it and there's like 5 side missions in every province. There's a lot of them, but the quality is not the best. Quantity over quality. I just didn't, a lot of the characters and their plights they're going through in life, I really didn't feel for them because they didn't deliver it. And it was just these short little conversations that you'd have with these characters. You'd look at them and you just kind of be like, and it's not like the voice actors are bad. It's like the lines and the dialogue they've been given is shit in some of the side missions. Much of the main story's dialogue is okay, but the delivery's better than okay, I'd say, by the voice actors themselves. But a lot of the dialogue in the side missions was throwaway dialogue. It was just like rushed, just not there. Like The Witcher 3, it was like great dialogue all the way through the game. And the voice acting was excellent all the way through. Really, really brought it with that on that side of things. That was one of The Witcher 3's strengths, to be honest. Definitely not though. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Like the main cast was like good voice acting, but the side characters some of them were better than others, some of them weren't. But definitely for the side missions, in terms of the mystery side missions, they were not the best. But it's because they were just trying to give you something to do. They didn't care about you getting anything. Well, obviously I'm sure they did, but it just didn't land. It felt like they were just looking to fill a gap, like just to put something in that space so you could go and do something over there. Not the fact of what you did, just to know that you had something to do, to make it padded out more, to put more time in the game. And it's not needed most of the time. They're really pointless side missions. You don't get anything out with them majority of the time. You get a lot of XP, which is why I was so leveled up. It's because I did all of them as I was going through, and I was just ended up really high level because I was doing it. So it gives you that incentive. But towards the end of the game, when you're doing like your 105th side mission, you're just like, oh my god, why you're making me carry this for you over here? I'm just here for the XP at this point. I know I've seen 100 other quests, like the little side missions that this game has to offer. They didn't really give me anything. I listened, I paid attention to all of them, but I didn't care for them. But especially by the end, I was drained of the side missions. I was just like, I was literally going up to side missions and I was praying that they were quick. There was a side mission. You'd walk up to a character, talk to them. That would be the side mission. You didn't have to do anything. And I was like, and that was towards the end of the game. I was like, thank God for that. You got to know they're doing something wrong with the side missions if you don't want to do them by the end. You just want to get the XP out of them. You don't care for them by the end of the game, unfortunately. Not all the mysteries are those side quests, are the dialogue side quests. A lot of them are like boss fights and stuff. Now, the animal boss fights were great. I did enjoy them. They actually varied it up from the normal enemy that you'd fight half the time, 90% of the time. So they were fun. I should have added that in the combat, but this is an off-the-cuff video, so I'm going to forget things, and then they'll come up later in the video. That's going to happen. I'm sorry. Okay, so anyway. But yeah, you'd have like... And in terms of exploration, let's talk about the exploration, specifically doing the side missions. I kind of touched on that just now anyway. But everything in terms of the wealth, the side missions, and the artifacts themselves. I felt like, again, quantity over quality. They put shit tons, an actual mecha shit ton of side content to do. And it just got draining by the end of it. I just didn't want to do it at the end because I was 100% in the areas I went through. The last couple of regions, my last 10, 15 hours of the game, and out of 92 hours, that's like, what? I don't even know. not even a third, but that's in regards to 92 hours overall. By the last 15 hours, which is not much in the game, it doesn't overall in what you do in the game, you've completed a lot of the game by the last 15 hours of the game. It was the last couple of areas, Hamptonshire and Sussex. Those two areas, I just didn't 100% them. I was sick and tired of doing it. I was like, I'm not doing them. I cannot be asked anymore. I've 100%ed all the other areas. And not even 100% in some of them because the quests glitched out and it was literally impossible to complete some of them. There's the one where they've got the nudists down by this pond thing, and the guy is like, oh, I'm the governor of the thing, but they've thrown me out because I take too much pleasure in it and stuff like that. And he said, oh, this will be funny. Go down, steal their box of clothes, and then bring them back up here. That'll be funny when they don't have their clothes to go back to. That's how throwaway some of the quests are. Regardless, I picked up the box, and I accidentally did something wrong, and he tripped and dropped the box in the water or something like that. The box never respawned, and I've reloaded the game many times, went back there, checked it. The box is just not there anymore. I cannot complete that quest. So it literally stopped me from... I'd done everything in that region. I'd collected all the wealth, all the artifact, and I'd done all the other mysteries. There was that one thing I needed to get the tick on that. I was furious, and that's not the first time it's happened either. That happened with a few of the quests in the game where they glitched out and bugged out and stuff like that. But again, a lot of it is just filler content. Like, there's Roman artifacts you can collect, give to a statue guy, and you can use it as a statue in your settlement area. It's really like, it's okay. It's like, those feel kind of rewarding, but they often hide a lot of the stuff you need to find by these little annoying puzzles that are easy to figure out, but they purposely put, like, fire pots, which you need to destroy walls, and they use repaired walls a lot in the puzzles. If you can even call them that. They're like mini puzzles, I guess. But like, basically like a chest would be behind this brick wall, but then you'd have to go to, and then like nearby, and you'd be like, okay, I need a fire pot to break that. It's the only way you can break them is a fire pot, by throwing it at it or placing it and then shooting it with an arrow next to it, and that's how you break the wall. And there are like a lot of these. You do this a lot in the game. And again, I'd stop doing that, like these things if I could help it. If it was like directly in my path to the main story with Hamptonshire and Sussex, I just would do them then. But if they were like more than 200 meters away from my character, I was like, I'm not doing it, because it could lead me on this stupid, tiny little side quest that I'll be sick of doing, and it was ruining the enjoyment of the game. The amount there was to do. Normally, more is better in games, but not in this case. There was too much. It was just making me not want to play the game, doing all these stupid little tasks for these stupid characters I never cared about, side mission characters that you'd never see again, and you'd meet them for 5 minutes and you'd be gone. And I'd end up having to do this stupid, like, and you knew you had to go off, and if you wanted to find this Roman artifact, you'd have to swim underneath here, then break a thing, get it, and just, it adds up to so much wasted time. You just know it's going to be like, I'm not going to get to the end of this game if I carry on doing these. It was just draining. I hated it. But yeah, you'd have a chest behind this broken wall. You're like, okay, I need a fire pot to break that. And then you go to, and then you start looking in the nearby area, because they're always nearby somewhere, but they hide them in like these little spaces and stuff like that. And usually you find them really quickly, but sometimes they hit them in pain in the ass spots that you could easily miss. And then you'd be looking around, and you'd spend 5-10 minutes looking for this effing fire pot to destroy this goddamn wall, ultimately for something you don't really care about, to get into this chest. If it was an armor piece, I cared about it. Anything else, I didn't really. Even just like, so there's like these bars you can fill up. There's like, if you've played the game, you'll know what I'm on about, but there's like a wealth, mysteries and artifacts. The wealth bar is like armor pieces, or like rare materials for upgrading armor. Essentially, those are the two things. Or raiding supplies for your village, and they were important, and I did all the raids and whatnot. And they were actually really fun part of the game. But it's like those were fun and all, but then there's also these little chests that don't count towards the wealth bar, but they still show up on the map if you zoom in. And the completionist in me was like, oh, I need to get them as well. And I was getting all of them with the first few provinces, and then I got sick and tired of getting those, because they'd hide them behind some stupid puzzles a lot of the time. And I'd be sick of it. I'd be like, these tiny chests I don't even care about, but it's tempting me. Maybe it's a personal issue, not me. But anyway, yeah, like I need to finish this goddamn puzzle thing I'm going on about. So there'd be a wall, you need to get a fire pot to break it, and then you start looking around the immediate area, and you see there's a house nearby. There's like, you're in the middle of a town, and you're like, well, shit, okay, it's not in this building, it's not around a corner, where is it? And then you end up finding there's another like mini chest or something like that in another place, and then you've got to like break a wall in the top of like the triangle bit of the house on the roof, climb in there, then you'll be like, oh, okay, the fire pot's in there, and then you need to destroy the bar door by shooting the lock or whatever, and then you'd have to carry the fire pot out, throw it in. Imagine doing that in multiple different variations of it, like 80 plus times. I swear I've done it over 100 times in that game, if not 200. It is ridiculous. You go off to do this side thing, you do so much of it, and you just get sick of doing these little puzzles because you know what's coming. You know you've got to... You end up getting used to it so much to the point where you can find it really quickly, but there are other times where they just go the extra mile to be a pain in your ass, and they hide it behind something, and you just cannot. You're stuck there for like 15 minutes, wasting your absolute time for, I don't know, this stupid little thing. It's like... And they fall on it too much. Why can't it be easy and go in and pick it up? You've got enough like puzzles behind these chests and these side bits you need to collect. Just make some of it easy. Make half of it easy. I don't know, because there's definitely more than half of it that's hidden behind mini puzzles that you don't give a shit about. And they're easy to figure out, but they're draining because they're so easy and pathetic and minuscule. They're just a hindrance. They're not even good puzzles. You don't enjoy figuring them out because they're so shit. And they try too hard with it. They really try too hard with it. But anyway, I did mention the raiding in the game. It's something I didn't touch on, the raiding. I did really enjoy the raiding mechanic. It made you feel like a Viking. You blow the horn, you just go and you take all your party. You get certain companions throughout, which you can put in your crew. And then I actually remember those characters a lot more for it. That was a really good part. They implemented those characters that affected the gameplay. That was a really good mechanic, Ubisoft. That was one of my high points for the game, was doing the raiding on the monasteries, stealing all the wealth, kill them all, sort of thing. It was a very immersive. It was very good. Just like kind of rowing up in your long ship, blowing the horn, going there, and you could like and your crew would start burning the houses down. You'd see them breaking pots in the houses, looking for stuff. They'd help you break through doors, like steal these massive chests. Really good part of the game. That was like the most fun I had in the game, was the raiding and some of the bigger assaults in the game, and we'll get onto that now. Again, a bit that I forgot, I can't believe it. It was a huge part of the game, but it kind of interlinks with the story, so I'll touch on that in the story. Speaking of which, is that everything in terms of everything aside from the story? Let's get on to bugs and glitches first. Story will be the last thing, because the story is probably one of the things I have the most to talk on. Definitely the story is the most I have to talk on. So these are my thoughts. I just needed to get these out. So bugs and glitches. What would happen? I did have a couple of crashes to desktop in the game. Kind of unacceptable at a release. I'm sorry, but you cannot have crash to desktops. It's annoying. It's happened in Watch Dogs Legion, a game that I have stopped playing because I got so bored of it. A quarter of the way, like halfway through the game, and I've just stopped playing it outright because I was like, okay, I'll just play Assassin's Creed Valhalla instead. I'm a lot more excited for that. And I had like COD Black Ops to play, which the story was immensely short on that, so I completed that really quickly. Because I was not going to get Call of Duty Black Ops because Cyberpunk was coming out right next to it. Then it got delayed, so I was like, okay, I'll get COD Black Ops. But anyway, yeah, bugs and glitches. So I'd had a couple of crash to desktops, only like out of the 92 hours, 2 or 3, but still there shouldn't be any. I just flat out believe you shouldn't have crash to desktops. Marvel's Avengers, you shouldn't have them. You just shouldn't. You shouldn't have them. Kind of not good. Not good. You'd have a lot of, like I said, you'd have clipping through things all the time, and I guess that's not a bug or a glitch, that's just the way it's been animated. But like I said, I'd have side missions that would completely bug out and it'd be impossible to complete them. Lip syncing would just go freeze a lot of the time. You'd get random, these aren't bugs and glitches, these are just like technical things, I guess. But in mid-conversation, you'd have this random NPC that just comes strolling through the middle of your conversation, and they get stuck on the other character, that they'd morph in them, and then you'd end up having this really awkward conversation. There was times like where you'd walk up to a character, speak to them, and you'd be inside that character speaking to them, like, what? It would just, oh my God, it would honestly, like, and there was like, so one of the quests that bugged out for me was, so there's these things you can move around which get involved in a lot of the side puzzles and the main puzzles where you have to move these crates, otherwise you cannot access that area. And there's this guy who's stuck in this warehouse, and there's all this horrible fish oil stuff that's around. And he's like, I'm trapped in here, get me out. This is one of the side missions, by the way. This is the quality of the side missions. If you compare this to The Witcher 3, yeah, you'll see this is what I mean. He's like, you walk up to this thing, and he's like, help me, I'm stuck. You end up climbing in, and it's like this diddy little wall. He could easily climb up it if he had to. But you come in, and he's like, I'm stuck, help me. And then you have to move like 3 sets of boxes and destroy, and there's like fish oil in the way, you have to destroy it. And when you blow it up, it's so bad smelling, Eivor throws up, and even that animation's a bit jank. It's like, and you have to destroy them, get them out of the way, move them. One of those crates just wouldn't move. It was permanently stuck where it was. I checked everywhere. There's no fish oil blocking it. There is nothing blocking it. Yet, it will not move. It is forever stuck in my gameplay, in my playthrough. I will never be able to complete that quest because that crate is stuck. You can't destroy it. You have to move it. You have to slide it along the floor, and it's just stuck on nothing. What? How can you bring a game out where there are bugs that make some of the side missions incompletable? And that happened in the main story as well. There was this point where you have to, I won't say this particular moment because it's quite a big moment in the game. Well, I guess maybe it'll come up in the story section. If you don't want to be spoiled in the story section, don't, don't watch the story bit, but it's fine, regardless. Anyway, there's this bit, and there's a big fight going on. You've got to help multiple people in this fight. You have to go to these different areas in this battle and help them out with their different issues. I'd done the other two. There were 3 of them. I'd done the other 2. Fine, no problem. I had a sad moment in one of them. It was actually a pretty sad moment in the game. The third encounter, I was like, okay, cool, I'm pumped up. I'm in this fight. I've helped these people. Come on, let's do it. I was like actually enjoying it. I was immersed. And I enjoyed a lot of the game for the most part, especially during the story. It was enjoyable. I'm making it sound like I hated it. But by the end, I was drained of doing sides. I hated side stuff by the end of the game. But anyway, I went to go and help this guy, this last guy, in this garrison. And I find out his character glitched out. He's supposed to be fighting with his warriors. What is he doing? He's doing this. He's walking away down this field that would make me lose the mission if I went to him because he was out of the bounds of the area. He was walking, weapons in his sheaths, and he was like, and he was doing this this weird animation of him being like cautiously looking. It's like he was like deserting the battlefield. Like the game had just decided to make him desert. It's not even supposed to be a part of the story. But he's walking. He's like walking away like this, doing this, and I'm like, what? What? You're just walking away out of the bounds. That's it. You just hung up your axe, have you? And you're just never gonna fight again. And I tried to follow him, and I ended up losing the mission, having to do all 3 of the tasks again. That pissed me off. So there definitely are some bugs here and there in the glitches with the missions, with some of the side missions. Be warned with some of those side missions, especially the oil one. That pissed me off. And that was in the main story, that one. So be careful, I guess. Aside from that, I didn't get any mission stopping bugs but there was just a lot of oddities throughout it. A lot of small ones, and then through 90 hours of playing a story, you notice them more and more as you go on. Because you don't see them on first time, but given 90 hours, you'll see them eventually. Trust me, you'll know what I mean. There's like oddities, clipping. Sometimes animations would be a little bit odd. And even then, after that, once the guy had walked out the bounds, I failed the mission, done the other 2. I went back in the garrison, and he was there, but his character was like stuck like this. He was doing this. He thinks he's Iron Man. And he was like this, frozen, still looking like this. What the fuck is that? How? Like, that was directly after. So that mission particularly was buggy. I guess it wasn't play tested enough. And in terms of the Order members, actually, no, let's play into the story. Let's talk about story. Fuck it. You know what? Big points I have to make here. So, overall, what did I think of the story? the story, I'm thinking before I'm speaking here, trying to get my thoughts together in my head. The story was good. It was good. It was okay. So essentially begins, and your father gets dishonorably murdered, and when you're like 10 years old, dies like a coward or whatever, and you end up being taken in by the king, and he has a son called Sigurd, and you become brothers. You get a very close bond, and it fast forwards like, I don't know how many years, 12 years. So he's in his like mid-20s or something, I don't know. But it fast forwards. It says at the beginning of the game, but after 92 hours, you try and remember how many fucking years passed. Anyway, yeah, and it fast forward, and they're like the closest people on the planet, and I believed it. They sold the relationship between Eivor and Sigurd. Those two were definitely, their relationship was one of the more interesting points of the story. And anyway, you have this vision, and the seer tells you one day you're going to betray your brother. And it's like, oh shit, okay. But they're really good friends and they're really close. How the hell is that going to happen? And you're like, okay, something's going to happen throughout the story. And then it's like, and then there's this king, I can't remember his name. King, began with a H. It began with a H. King Halfdan. I want to say Halfdan. I think it's Halfdan. There are so many names in this as well. You try and remember all of them. There are so many old, like, English medieval names. You will not remember all of them. Guaranteed. It won't happen. There were just that many. And they were at the end of the story. There were characters that I'd like been with in the story, and I'd be like, oh shit, what's their name? I like them as a character. I just forget their names. Maybe I'm just bad with the names. That's probably it. But yeah. Anyway, and your adopted father, the father who adopted you, who is like the king of the area. This King Halfdan, it says like, basically kneel to me, don't fight me, and we can become one united Norway. And the father that adopted you, is like, oh yeah, sure, okay, that's fine. It's just for the best for my people. We don't have the manpower to fight you. It's for the best of my clan. Sigurd is pissed off. His son Sigurd, who is your brother, who's your, your brother, who's part of the family that adopted you. He's like, what the hell? It's my right to be king. You can't throw away my right without my consent. He gets super pissed off. He's like, let's go to England. Let's go and start anew. Cool. I'm up for that story. I thought it was going to be about the first invasion of the Vikings with Ragnar Lothbrok, but it's not. He's already been to England. There's already Vikings in England in the story, including the sons of Ragnar. Ragnar has died at this point in the story. He dies before the game even, like, before you even get to England, and you don't know it until you meet his sons. And we'll get to them later. But you go to England and you start this camp, this settlement called Ravensthorpe. I think you get to name it as well. I can't quite remember. I'm pretty sure you name it though. But or maybe not. But you basically take up the old camp of the Ragnar sons. And it's like, okay, cool. And you build it up. And this is a great system in the game that definitely I enjoyed a lot. You slowly, from the supplies you get from raiding and the supplies you get from these little chests. That's why the little chests that don't count towards the wealth part are important, because you get supplies from them that you need to upgrade the camp. So you do need to go after them a lot of the time, which I did a lot in the beginning, and it gave me so many I could just power through, thank God. So I didn't have to do a lot of them at the end of the game, but because I got so tired of them. But you upgrade it, and your settlement level goes up to 6 levels, and if the bar fills up each time you level up something. And you add, like, fishery, and at the beginning, some of the main buildings add new, add new mechanics. Like I said earlier, you could get certain companions through the game that you can put in your Viking crew. You couldn't do that if you didn't have the barracks. You needed to build the barracks to be able to do that. Fishing, you wouldn't have a fishing hook unless you built the fishery. Going and hunting Templars, you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't build that. So it definitely has some direct impacts. The Assassin's Creed. Let's get to the point actually. So anyway, overall, the relationship between Sigurd and Eivor is good. I enjoyed it. Now let's talk about the assassins in the game. Of course, this is an Assassin's Creed game. I love the old Assassin's Creed games. They were like, I loved them a lot. Even Revelations. Even I played Assassin's Creed 1 way back. I need to replay that. Playing this made me want to replay the old Assassin's Creed games because I missed how the old Assassin's Creed games were and played. It was kind of sad. It made me realize I preferred the more, and again, quantity over quality this game is, whereas the old Assassin's Creed games I felt were quality over quantity, for sure. They had a lot in them, but they were good quality. They didn't make these overly big worlds and end up sacrificing overall quality of the game for it. And maybe, obviously, back then there were technical limitations to how big you can make your world, and now time's moved on, we have the ability to make these big worlds, but do you necessarily need to, is what I'm saying. Do you really need to build these huge bloated worlds with all these unnecessary things in it, and that you spend so much time working on all that extra, not necessary stuff, it degrades from the quality of other areas of the game. And again, my main point we'll get to at the end, that I think could alleviate the issues. I think that there was a lot going on in the story with the assassins, but you only meet 2 assassins in the whole game, Hytham and Basim. They come along, so Sigurd is like, when you fast forward in time, Sigurd's away and he's been to Constantinople, and he's been away, and he comes back and he brings 2 people from the Creed, from the assassins, and they're actually back then in that time for lore purposes. They're called the Hidden Ones. They're not called the Assassins, and the Templars aren't called the Templars. They're called the Order of Ancients. But they come along. They're like, we have a gift. Like your brother's like, I've got a gift for you. They've got I told them much about you and stuff like that, and they thought. They were like, I've got a gift for you. They give him a hidden blade. Eivor does not become an assassin. He doesn't become a part of the Order. The only reason he gets involved in killing Templars is to basically, he's doing it for the good of his own people. He's like, they're trying to get in positions of power and leech into all these different political groups and whatnot. And he's killing them just to keep his people safe away from them, essentially. Which, I don't know, I kind of wished Eivor would just become an assassin. I wished it was like the old Assassin's Creed games where you were a part of the assassin order. You're not even playing as an assassin anymore. You're not even a part of the Order. You're just killing Templars, and now that's good enough. You're assassinating them, sure, but you're not a part of the Assassin's Creed Order. A lot of the good that came out of the old Assassin's Creed games was the fact that you were in the Order, you were a part of the Creed, and I wanted to see more into that. But you get this very light and over-the-top involvement in it, and it's like, there's this order of people, they're very bad, they've got influence and power, and they want to make everyone believe, and they want structure and order, and they want these pieces of Eden, that whatnot, and you're like, okay, you learn Templars are bad. And then you end up going, and there's a system in the game where you can assassinate the Order, essentially, and you can see their hierarchy, a bit like Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War. Think of the hierarchy system in that. But once they're dead, they don't get replaced. It's just like, once they're dead, and you slowly eliminate one by one by one by one. And a lot of them you eliminate in the main story, because they infiltrate many cities that you try to make alliances with. So one of the main parts is, when you get to England, the structure that the campaign takes, there's a couple of oddities and side bits aside from this, but the main bit is that you go away to a section of the game, like Leicestershire, Oxenfordshire. These are different areas that have their own wealth, mystery, and artifact bars that the map split up in. And you go there and you're like, okay, there's a reason I need to be there. Before it was like, Sigurd rode, at the beginning of the first one you go to, it's like, Sigurd rode north, and to meet the Ragnar sons, go and join him and see if you can make allies of him. You do that multiple times, pretty much in every area of the game except for the last couple. And you literally just go through it and you do the same thing. The relationships are pretty good between some of the characters. Some of the characters definitely are better than others. I really liked Halfdan Ragnarson in Northumbria, up in the north of the game. He's a much later campaign character, but he was really cool. I liked him. There were definitely some intriguing points. There were good points in this story, and they could have developed on them and made him so much more emotional and just better. Like, they're good moments, but they could have been so much more if they didn't have all this other bloat around it that they didn't need. For example, Finir, there's this guy who's like, Halfdan's left him in place to try and place an Elderman in this particular area of the game, and you're like, okay, I'll go and you basically Randvi, Sigurd's wife, who I ended up romancing in the end, essentially, which the romance is kind of crap. You went on this side quest, this one mission with her, and you get the choice to romance her, and that's it. And then you're in a relationship. You choose to break up with them, have sex with them, or kiss them, and that's it. That's all you can do with them for the rest of the game. You can't go on other quests with them or talk to them, really. Randvi's a big part of the story, but she's like, they don't acknowledge the relationship, really. The only time I noticed, like, it actually felt like you had a relationship with that character was when Sigurd returned, like, much later in the game. Sigurd was in the camp, because Sigurd goes away from the camp for, like, the first half of the game. Once he leaves for the Ragnar Sons, he's just out and not even in the camp for the first half of the game. So and Randvi's, like, basically like shackled to the chamber, not literally, metaphorically, and she needs some air, and then you go out and talk, and there's a lot of chemistry and whatnot, and she's like, oh, I've been feeling this way about you for a long time, and whatnot. I was like, okay, sure, why not, I'll romance you. It's the first option I got in the game, so I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then the only other time I felt like they genuinely sold the romance in the game, which they didn't really. It was very kind of just like, you did, but then they don't really further reinforce that later in the game. It's kind of pointless. It's like like Sigurd returns eventually, and he's in the room, and you're like, and you try to kiss her. Say if you tried the option to kiss her, I was curious because Sigurd was in the room. I was like, if they let you kiss his own wife in front of him, that'll be stupid. But actually, she was like, no, not while Sigurd's here, not in front of him. And I was like, okay, thank God. They have a bit of goddamn decency. But yeah, there was this guy called Finir, and he was like the advisor who was sent there by Halfdan Ragnarson. And there was this very young kid, and he was like, there was this good arc of him being a weakling, and he wouldn't stand up for himself and whatnot. He'd just take it and never give back. And he's trying to marry this woman who's a Dane. And her brothers shit all over him, essentially, and don't want it to happen, this marriage to happen, but they have great military power. So you go over there, and you're like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to make an alliance. And you speak to Finir, and you're basically like, oh, you're doing a shit job of this, and then you start talking to the kid, and you end up making this relationship. Eventually, Finir becomes a companion that can join you on your Viking raiding crew, which is really cool. And I actually liked that story arc a lot. There's a lot of good story arcs in it, but there's so much extra bits in it that weren't needed, and there was so much in the game, they couldn't focus on it enough to make it more impactful. And the story overall was good, but it was like, it could have been so much more. It really could have been. They could have, if they made the areas a bit like not so much in them, and then focused a bit more on doing more story stuff with those characters. There were some genuinely sad moments where major characters did die that you made friends with, and you do actually create a bit of an emotional connection with some of the characters, some more than others. And I've just understood it's really hard to explain the story because it's such a long, bloated story. But essentially, you do this alliance thing throughout the game, and over time, it gets interesting. You make an alliance with this one group, and then Alfred the Great turns up out of nowhere with a reinforcement army, and you're like, well, shit, we can't beat him in the field of combat. He's got too big of an army, so you go and parlay with him. And there's this woman, Folka, who tricked you, essentially, and she's one of Alfred's advisors, and she ends up you end up trading Sigurd to make a peace offering. Because he believes he's godly and whatnot, and Basim's like speaking in his ear. Basim speaks in his ear, and basically makes him believe he's like this other godly being. But it gets very complicated and convoluted as the story goes on. And the whole assassin thing is like, they're basically like, oh, I'll teach you how to do this, that, and the other. But you don't feel like an assassin. You just feel like this Viking who's going out and killing Templars because it's like, oh, they're going to hurt my people. There's no real emotional connection to take out the Templars. You're just doing it because you know they're going to be safer for them. And I know they're a danger because I've played the previous games. If you've never seen these guys in the previous games, you're like, okay, they're bad. They have political power and they have their own agendas. Like this group has their own agenda. That's it. That's all you'd know if you played this as your first game. Whereas in the old Assassin's Creed games, it really was the Assassins versus the Templars, but it's no longer the case. Now it was just about you as a Viking securing your land. They should have just made a Viking game. They shouldn't have connected this to Assassin's Creed. They get the Assassins out, get the Templars out, make a Viking game. What's wrong with that? You don't have to churn out these games just because you want a new history setting and you just couldn't think of anything else but Vikings. I'm sure they've got a list of timelines that they want to go through. It just wasn't needed, I don't think. Ultimately, this game, it needed to not be to do with assassins, because they chuck into assassins. Ooh, his assassins. Ooh, here's a hidden blade. It used to mean something getting a hidden blade. It used to mean something to get these upgrades and be a part of this order in the games. It made you feel emotional connection. You just don't to the assassins. There's no emotional connection to the assassins for me, because one of them ends up disappearing for majority of the game, and the other is sitting in your camp all the time because he gets injured at the beginning of the game somehow from this stupid cutscene that does not portray that he gets injured. You don't know it. I was like, wait, he got injured in that fight at the beginning of the game? And you're like, the fuck? He got injured from that? What a pussy. He literally just got pushed over hard, and he's like out of combat for the rest of the game. It's like, literally, I didn't understand it, that part, but anyway, he stays in his little house for the rest of the game, and each member has a medallion. You give him a medallion, and then he gives you a new ability, and he's like, but thing is, what again, this is showing, like, the smaller details shows its cracks. You have to have, like, a certain amount before you can give him in. So you need, like, first time you need, like, 4 to give in, then you need, like, 5 to give in, 6, and then, like, 11 of the medallions to give in. You give in 6 of them, he's like, one more gone from the wall. It's like, I'm sorry, that's 6 medallions? Can you count? And I was like, okay, sure, they really thought about the dialogue in that one, didn't they? And it gives you a new ability, and of which none of the abilities the assassins gave me I used, because they were kind of rubbish. They were better abilities, personally, in my opinion. And you give him these codex pages as well, that you'd find in the assassin bureaus. That was a cool part. You'd actually go into these different, because basically the assassins had left Britain like hundreds of years ago, and now the Templars had infested England again, which is why there were so many of them to kill. And they was like, okay, they've infested a lot of the political hierarchy in England. You need to get rid of them as you go on. And it was like, okay, I'm doing it for my own people to get rid of these people. I'm not doing it for the assassins. I'm doing it for my own people, essentially. And it's like, well, I want to do it for the assassins. I want to be an assassin and kill Templars. It's like the whole point of Assassin's Creed. If you want to make a game where you're a Viking, make a game about being a Viking. Don't mix it with the Assassin's Creed series. I don't see why. Just return to the combat system of Assassin's Creed Unity as well. It was good. It was fun. We didn't need an RPG thing. It's like, if this game was not called Assassin's Creed, I would probably give it a higher score, because it accomplishes a good amount of it, of the feeling of being a Viking. Not that I know what that's like. I never lived during, the 9th century, but regardless, what the popular modern day perception is on Vikings, you can accomplish that for the most part. But you've got all this muddiness of the Assassin's Creed and all this just stuff. So, like, there's a cohesiveness to the story with the allies and everything. That's what I mean. If they didn't have the assassins in, the story would be better for it, I think. Because they would actually be able to keep this mainline Viking main story going on. But eventually the Templar Order gets jammed into the story. after trying to take over after they're trying to take over England, and Sigurd ends up finding out he has a connection to the Ancient Ones, who are like the gods, the ancient gods, the true gods, because obviously there's like Odin and all that that get mixed into it as well, and like he's distrusting Eivor. It gets a bit more interesting then, and then you end up, it gets really kind of out of control by the end of it, eventually it's funny. It's an Assassin's Creed game, and at the end of the game, I did not care for the Templars nor the Assassins. I cared about Eivor and his journey as a Viking and taking over England. I didn't give a shit about the Assassins at the end, which is sad. I wanted to give a shit about the Assassins. I wanted Eivor to become an assassin and get really heavily invested in the Order, but they didn't go down that route. He's just a Viking who was given a hidden blade as a gift and then told to kill Templars. He didn't have to go through the training. He somehow already has the ability to parkour all over the place like an absolute god and jump from 60 feet height and not take damage. You'd always see people training and going through this process, like Arno in Assassin's Creed Unity. He just finds out he has the ability of an assassin. He has to train. He goes through rigors and trials and he becomes a master assassin by the end of the game. It's cool. It's really cool, the Assassin's Creed games and their lore and how the Assassin's Creed Order's done. It's just chucked to the wayside in this game. Because there's the modern day time story going alongside this. I did not give a shit for that one bit, gonna be honest. It's connected to Odyssey and Origins, I know that much because of that character you play as in the modern day, both of them, so I didn't really know what was going on outside of it. And let's be honest, a lot of people only care about, I did care about it with Desmond, the modern day story. As soon as Desmond was killed off in the modern day story, I just didn't care anymore. It got better with Arno, and that was still okay. But the route they've gone down with Origins, Odyssey, and I just don't care about the modern day story anymore, quite frankly. And at the very end of the game, it links to the modern day story, unfortunately, because I didn't give a shit about it. So there was all this stuff going on at the end of the story to do with the Ancient Ones and stuff like that. And I just didn't care, because the modern day story I didn't care for. And then somehow there's the Staff of Eden. I'm assuming that's what it's called. I don't actually know what it's called. That's held by Cassandra in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. They have that staff. They found it in Odyssey, I'm assuming. I haven't completed it, so I don't know. They found that staff and it heals you. And Basim gets put in this machine that the Ancient Ones had, and he somehow manages to make it to modern day, and he's from the Viking Age. It gets really weird. The modern day story I'm really not for anymore, and I kind of just forgot it happened I erased it from my memory in the Eivor story, because if they made this a Viking only story, it would have been better for it, because they made it more like Vikings with a hint of assassin. If you're gonna do Assassin's Creed, go all the way. Do it. Just do it. Go like Ezio, where you see his journey as an assassin. Don't chuck him to the wayside and be like, kill Templars. It just doesn't work. That part of it, the integral part of it, the Assassins, Templars section of this doesn't work, because you don't play as an assassin to kill Templars. They're chucked to the wayside, and they're always a presence, but you never care about them ultimately. You just want to get these alliances, and you want to see these relationships with these other Vikings and Saxons play through. You don't care whether they're Templars. Ultimately, they have a factor in it, but you don't ultimately care too much for it. Like I said, it has its good moments. The times I enjoyed the story the most when it didn't involve the Assassins and the Templars, when it was just about like him trying to sway these people and do these things for these people to get alliances. And even then, it's kind of like a weak way of doing the story. It's like they tried to do a Mass Effect thing. You know how in Mass Effect 2, you get a story, you do a loyalty mission, you get a story, you get a new character, you do a loyalty mission. It's kind of like that. It's better. It fits Mass Effect a lot better too. Mass Effect 2 a lot better, I think. But they've done it on like a massive scale here, essentially. And it just kind of gets a bit repetitive toward the end. But I did care for the Viking characters that had nothing to do with the Assassin's Order or the Vikings. Or the Templars, sorry. And I only cared about... I cared about Eivor and him trying to do the best for his people as Vikings and trying to settle this new land. I didn't care about him, and sure, killing the Templars was a part of that, but I cared more about him getting alliances and making sure that his people were safe. And I connected with the characters he made alliances with, and that was it. Those were the bits I enjoyed. And I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. But this is what I mean. And I'll get to my point of quantity over quality now. There was so much potential. If they got rid of the Assassins thing and the Templars, I honestly think this would have been a lot better for it. If they got those chunks of the story out of the way. And if they downscaled the map a bit and filled it with more content, I guess. So don't, kind of like the old Assassin's Creed games where there's these smaller areas, but they're dense and packed with things to do. But because there's so many, because thing is, the game is already dense and packed, but with shit you don't need. It's like there's these massive areas. You have to travel on horse a lot. And they filled it with stuff, but stuff that is not needed. You don't care for them, ultimately. You really don't. I didn't, at least. By the end of the game, at the beginning, I cared about getting it because I was like, ooh, new game. Cool. I got to do this. I got to go and get this thing. So, there's this to do. There's that to do. By halfway through, you're like, this is getting a bit tedious and repetitive, and you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then by the end of the game, you hate it. I hated the side stuff by the end of the game. All those extra little bits you need to collect. It really just started grating on me. And I was like, it got me pissed off at points. I was genuinely angry, at points where I was like, dude, just stop wasting my time. I don't need to be here doing this. This is a quest I'll never remember. With The Witcher, you do them because they feel meaningful. They have good messages to them. They have, not messages, but they have great characters to them. These side characters that you're only with for minutes. But they deliver dialogue so well. And it's done so well that you connect to those characters and you give a shit. You just don't give a shit in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It's just not there. The care factor is not there. And they needed to take more care. If they dialed down the game and they focused on less stuff, give it a good sized game, because the game is massive, but again, filled with filler content. So if you downsized it, got the filler out of there, and then focused on those current quests that are left, and downsize the story so there's not as many alliances. It's easy to say rather than do. You'd need to rebuild a whole new game upon this idea, but this is how they should have done it. The voice acting suffered because they had to do all this voice acting, and there were so many characters in the story, so many, that it ended up just being like this mishmash of weird dialogue, and it was very on and off dialogue. It was either good or bad, and then the voice acting was sometimes delivered okay, and it kind of was bland and kind of sameish though with some of the characters. There were some characters who were so similar, and it was it ended up being so many characters and so many alliances. They ended up repeating it so much, it ended up just suffering for it. If you did it a few less times than you do it in the game, it would have been a lot more bearable, but you just know what you're going to do. It's predictable as well. You just okay, I go and do a good thing for this person, then I end up, yeah, you get my point. It's like if they made the campaign, they took out those weird mini quests in the middle that didn't need to be there. They kind of vary it up. They downsize the game a bit like the old Assassin's Creed games. They literally just focus so much more. They could have focused on, and if they downsized it, they could probably use better graphics in it again, because I think the characters quality the texture quality for the characters suffer because the game is so big. They won't be able to physically, technically make it be able to run. So they had to downgrade the quality. They could make it smaller, better quality, get less cast in, so you pick your choices a bit better, and there's less script, so you can do a bit better, focus on the dialogue a bit more, focus on the characters a bit more. You're not doing all these silly little things with these characters, you're not making as much, so you can put more detail in the environment, and there could be a good story in there for Vikings. But if you were going to make another Assassin's Creed game, make it about the assassins. Don't chuck them in as a side thing and then make it as a side objective throughout the whole game. They have some big implications in the main story, but you ultimately don't care during the story. And when it gets to this, the climax point of where it's like, oh, God, this really does involve Templars and Assassins, it's kind of like, but I care more about being a Viking now than I do an assassin in this game. I want to fulfill the Viking. Now you're ripping me out of the Viking fantasy and trying to pull me into this assassin thing. And it's like, and it's too little too late at the end of the game. It's like they just couldn't make their mind up. It's really weird. It's a perplexing issue that I've never seen in an Assassin's Creed game. And you know what it's made me do? I've reinstalled Assassin's Creed Unity. I did it today. I've uninstalled Valhalla. And I've reinstalled Assassin's Creed Unity to play through that. That's right. So, those are my thoughts. It's been over an hour and 15 minutes of talking. I literally had to get my thoughts out. This is an off-the-cuff video. I wasn't planning on this. So, obviously, my thoughts are going to be all over the place. I am going to be jumping back and forth between different points. I have been. But I needed to get this off my chest and talk about it because I was just thinking about it all day today, and I needed to make my peace with the game, get my thoughts out there. Ubisoft, quality over quantity. Next time, please, not quantity over quality, because they just tried to do so much in one go, it just degraded the quality of the overall game. If they downsized it a bit, brought the scale down, they could focus more on the quality aspects of it. Because there were some good moments. There was potential for good characters. They could have done more with certain characters if there weren't so many characters. They dumbed down the amount of characters there are to focus more on some of the good ones. It could have been something. It really could have been good. And they could have had more time to fine-tune the combat. It's like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a video game designer, but generally I think I have some good points in terms of the... doing quality over quantity. They would have, it would have been a lot better. There are probably definitely some points I've missed out, some major aspects of the game that I've probably missed, but I needed to talk about it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, guys.